Well, Danielle, thanks so much for taking time to hang with us today. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to hear about your background, your story of awakening to consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality. Um, did you grow up with some sort of faith tradition as part of your family environment, or was that something new that unfolded later in life?
Um, so my family has always been, more church going people. Um, Always, we were in an Episcopal church. So that was faith has always been a part of my life. But as I've gotten older, matured, trying to establish spirituality for my family, my children, my husband and I. Um, our views around how we practice is a little different than, the traditional how we grew up. We really feel like our faith is in our heart, our lives, our spirit, how we practice, how we um, reflect and work with other people, how we treat other people. And so we didn't always feel like there was a church or a religion that necessarily matched how we felt in our connection with our beliefs and our God. And so from there, as I've aged, gotten older, I knew that physical movement was a necessity for me in my life. Um, the things that I practice, how I, what I do on a day to day, that's demonstrating to my family, especially my children, how they should live their lives, whether I say it directly or whether they just see me doing it, right? And so I've I've chose yoga primarily as, the method in which felt good for me, that I could be consistent with, that I enjoyed, brought happiness and joy to my life. I don't necessarily push that on my family, but definitely encourage them to do things, to move their body in ways that bring them joy, bring them happiness that they feel fulfilled with, and they can do it consistently.
How was yoga introduced to you, and what was that initial impact on your life?
Yeah. Um, I'm not sure the exact moment in which I was, formally introduced to yoga, but I remember around 2017, I want to say it was, I'm here in Houston, just shortly either after or before Hurricane Harvey. There was a studio near my home at that time. Um, Unfortunately, they're no longer open, but they're called Some Like It Hot. And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I visited their website and they offered so many forms of, yoga, spirituality, movement, um, different types of yoga, booty yoga, meditation, so it was a really great way to be introduced to the practice and try different things, see what felt good for you, right? You don't necessarily have to go as deep into the practice as other people. It gave a lot of options. And there was a really nice community around them that I enjoyed. And I think that's really when I, kind of felt empowered, like, hey, this is a thing that that I like to do, that I might be interested in learning more, maybe even teaching. I wasn't necessarily ready to teach them, but asking questions, asking other, instructors, um, what life as a yoga instructor is like. Um, and so it wasn't actually until 2022 after COVID, or maybe 21 actually, after COVID, where I started the yoga instructor training. So in 2020, obviously COVID happened. We were all locked up. So a lot of my practice was indoors. But not only was I indoors, we, my husband and I, got pregnant with our second child. So my movement and abilities were limited. you know, I had a lot of hip stiffness. All the maternity stuff that women go through. I dealt with it, and especially because we were inside a lot. I think it exasperated some of those things. The sciatica. Um, we tried to get out and like walk, tried to ride a bike, but that was more uncomfortable than helpful. Um, but just still indoors more than I would have been. And so once I had him, um, my body's still recovering, taking a little bit longer than before. My oldest son and my youngest are almost 10 years apart. So there's quite a time span between the two. And so, I got a little bit older, um, suffered from, high blood pressure that I was struggling to get down from during the pregnancy, and just needed something more gentle. My initial thought was like, okay, when after you had your first son, you were, lifting weights and doing these other, high intensity trainings and stuff like that. And I realized at the point in my life, my body isn't responding too well to this. I do those exercises and feel like a train wreck, literally. And I didn't even do that much, or at least I didn't feel like I did that much, but in my mind, comparatively speaking, it's like I just doing a little, 5 to 10 pound dumbbells and, few crunches and, lunges or whatever, and felt awful, barely could move the next day. And, learned that there was a new yoga studio opening near our home at the time. And then once they opened, I was like one of the first people that signed up. I was like, I have to go. And so I was going there for a few months, and they had a few really nice instructors. And one day there happened to be one in the studio that was a master trainer. And so I just happened to ask, hey, more about how to be a yoga instructor. What's that like? Wasn't necessarily, again, thinking I wanted to in that moment, but it was kind of like, I'm glad you asked, because we're about to start instructor training in about a month. It would be great to have you. So I was like, oh, wait, that wasn't necessarily the intent of my question, but it gave me a lot to think about. And, shortly after I signed up for their training, and went through the 200-hour instructor training.
It's wonderful. Talk to me about these other modalities, because I know as a coach, you offer not just helping people, perhaps locally or even via Zoom with yoga, but hypnotherapy, somatic exercises, even NLP. How did
Right.
each one of those modalities come into your life?
Yeah. So oftentimes, and I don't know if it's just the, Google searches and social media algorithms playing a factor, but, once you're interested in a topic, this case be it yoga, and you start doing more research, especially as going through the training, learning about different concepts, gradually get introduced to additional concepts, the surrounding factors. And so that's kind of how I kind of started discovering some of these other components, as well as being introduced to them through the training. Um, but it was really when, during that time, I was recovering not only from the postpartum, but my husband and I both lost our fathers in 2021.
Hmm.
And so it was a healing journey as well for me, especially the instructor training. I didn't realize going into it, but it was. Um, and as I was, learning more, stumbling upon, the somatics, how it tied in with what I was already doing and learning with the yoga, the movement, the mobility. I already had, just in general, like to stretch, but adding the mobility and how that um, helps keep us young. Um, Oftentimes in just yoga, it's more just about the stretch, deepening the stretch, but we don't necessarily focus on the joint movement. And so that's where um, the somatics tied in for me. Other activities that I had done in the past, movement, especially in the shoulders, had been a big deal, recovering from any injuries. And so it's like, wow, this is a great way to not just heal, but maintain, the synovial fluid, the movement as you get older, recovering from injuries, things like that. And then with the somatics,
I'd love to jump in here to
yeah,
help people understand, because you have written a book called Somatic Exercise Made Simple, and
yes,
we'll go into that in just a minute. But help people understand, if they're not, the difference between yoga and somatic exercises, because you're teasing that out a little bit. Like, hey,
yes,
one's about the stretch and one's about mobility. Help people understand the difference between those two and why, how you utilize that with clients.
yeah. Well, with somatics, it definitely focuses on awareness, being aware of what your body needs in that moment, slowing down your thoughts, which yoga teaches you as well. But with somatics, it's more of a experience sensing in the body, specifically where you might have some pain points or discomfort, or even where you're feeling good, and being able to do what we call body scans to understand what you're feeling in that moment. Sometimes you might wake up like, oh, I'm feeling some discomfort, but taking the time to really channel, where is that coming from? Where is that feeling coming from? And that's where somatics comes in. You can focus and isolate those areas more than what you might do in a traditional yoga practice.
And the
Yoga's
benefit.
great.
Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I was going to say yoga's great for, an overall sense of well-being, stretching, feeling of the overall body. But somatics is more of isolation of specific areas for specific needs.
hmm Yeah, so I want to dive into your book. As I mentioned, it's called Somatic Exercise Made Simple. And then I think you have the longest subtitle ever. I'm just going to tell you, Danielle. The subtitle is Learn Gentle, Accessible Exercises for Pain Relief, Stress Reduction, Improved Mobility, and Deep Relaxation Techniques to Enhance Your Mental and Physical Health. That is search engine optimized. I'm going to tell you. All right, so let's just call it Somatic Exercise Made Simple. I
Yes,
downloaded your book this week, and I know we had talked about it previously, but it was so great to see all the images inside. And I just have the Kindle
yes.
version, but I know you have, is it paperback and hardback, or just paperback?
Both. And the audiobook will be released pretty soon. So that will be available
Perfect.
shortly.
So I have the Kindle version, and there's some great photos of you demonstrating each of the different exercises, and you break the book down into different sections. Um, can you walk us through how you, maybe even why you created the book? I always love to hear why somebody wrote a book, and
Yeah.
then how it's broken down so that people can check it out.
Yeah. So I wrote the book with basically the people in my inner circle in mind. you know, I'm one of the few people I know within my family that consistently practice yoga. Everybody else feels like yoga is not for them, right? They're like, oh, that's for hippies, or or oh, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, even though you don't have to be flexible. Like uh, it's a practice, right? You get there. And so I know that yoga studios, traditional yoga studios, or even doing videos for a lot of people are intimidating.
I would tell you, it was like 3 years ago. I was going through massive change in my life, massive, painful experiences, and I had always thought, man, yoga looks interesting, and I'm thinking it's just going to be a bunch of hot 20-year-old chicks in there. And I'm going to be this old man trying to bend over. This is going
Right.
to be embarrassing. Like, that's what's going through my head.
Right.
And so I broke through the barrier and walked in. I was like, okay, here I am. Here I am with my mat. And, everybody's focused on their own thing. They're not looking at
Right.
you. They're not
Right.
worried about the old man up front falling over. Standing back, by the way. I'm going to just tell you if you're. So I'm with your family. I know that
Right.
feeling. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are there, right? That if they're new to it, they know that it might be helpful. Maybe their doctors told them, oh, you should start stretching, you should start moving. But there's that intimidation factor. Say similar with just going to a gym. Like you think, oh, there's going to be all these people there lifting all these weights or looking their best. That's not always the case. Sometimes it can depend on the studio or where you're
Depends
going,
on
right?
the gym. Yeah, it
Right.
depends on the gym for sure.
Right. And so I wrote this in with those people in mind so that you don't have to go to a studio. You can do it on your own. It doesn't have to be, this necessarily deep spiritual practice. Somatic exercise made simple is about healing your body, movement, doing the things that you need for your body. The one thing that I find with, going to a class or pulling up a video online, it's not centered around your own physical needs. So
Mhm.
you could
Mhm.
step into a class and maybe the class is on heart opening, you know, type stretches, but really you need hips and lower back.
Mhm.
And maybe you'll touch on those things, but the class isn't specifically for your needs.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, that could, if you overdo it, you're not thinking about how your body moves, what injuries you might have had. Even sometimes you may not even realize you've had an injury, could overdo it and potentially cause more damage than good. And
Mhm.
so, somatic exercise made simple is set up to point to the pain. What are your specific needs?
Mhm.
And you can just flip to that section and
Mhm.
work on that section.
Yeah, I've got the table of contents open here now. Chapter 1, foundation, the kind of the basics and basic
Mhm.
techniques. Chapter 3, tailoring somatic practices to your life. So, if it's more for morning or when you're traveling,
Mhm.
somatics for physical health. Chapter 5 for mental and emotional well-being. So I can kind
Mhm.
of understand if I'm just getting introduced to this, I could go, oh, so these are movements. This is not a flow like where yoga is a flow. These are individual practices that I could focus on
Right.
kind of one at a time, depending on what I need. The physical aspect, I see how you're helping me. Like you said, whether it's moving, I've got a shoulder issue or hips or whatever. Talk to me about how these movements can help for, and maybe even demonstrate. Like, tell me, like, give me an example of what some of these movements are that would be helpful for mental and emotional well being.
Yeah. The biggest one is not even a movement, it's the breath work. One thing that differentiates somatics or what makes somatics, it's breath work, movement, meditation, those three things combined. So always remembering, okay, I might do this exercise, but not just going through the motion, breathing, sensing, visualizing that joint or that part of the body, how it's feeling, using the oxygen to circulate the blood into that area. And that's really where the healing happens,
Hmm.
not just the movement, but always remembering to breathe throughout the movement,
Hmm.
breath to movement. So inhale with one motion, Exhale with the next.
Can you give us an example of something? Because a lot of us sit at our desks. I'm here at this desk like
Yeah.
8 to 10 hours a day. Um, Give me an example of something that I could do if I'm just seated that would help me in
Yeah,
terms of my physical or emotional well-being.
definitely. And there's actually a whole section on exercises for desk workers because I know, myself included, oftentimes at a desk. So, one that I was just kind of demonstrating shoulder circles. So, with the breath, inhaling as you roll your shoulders up towards your ears and exhale down your back. And you can feel as you exhale the tension just melt out of your neck, your shoulders. And you just do that as many times as you need going forward and always remembering going back. Whatever you do on one side, doing to the other, making sure that your body has balance. Um, some other stretches just sitting at your desk, some neck stretches. So you can, sometimes I use my hand as a guide, but gently turning the top of your head towards your shoulder, feeling the stretch down your side of your neck. You can bring your gaze slightly towards the ceiling to deepen the stretch and just kind of drop that shoulder down. You can even press your hand down towards the ground to lengthen as you feel the stretch through your neck. You inhale, rise back to center, and exhale, tilt to the other side. Bring your gaze towards the ceiling. Feel the stretch through the side of your neck and shoulders. And inhale back to center. You can do some head tilts to bring your chin to your chest. Inhale, open. Lift your chin towards the sky. Exhale, close. Inhale, open. And exhale, close. So you can see just in those movements and, in your own practice, doing it as many times as you feel you need, using that sensing, visualizing the muscle as you stretch and just feeling that release. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that is so amazing how such a simple exercise. That was one of the things that I noticed in the book, the photos, as well as the accompanying videos. The movements are pretty gentle.
yes.
I mean, was there any movement that's like the downward dog? God, I just hate that. My blood's rushing to my head. My hands are squeaking forward.
Right.
Um, these movements, are all of them pretty gentle like this?
In this book, yes.
Mhm.
I do have another one that I'm working on. That's more of I'm calling it the mastery program. So, not that the movements aren't gentle, but by this point, you would have at least done a consistent practice for the 28 days it's recommended, and you're ready to build on that. you know Not necessarily that they're that hard or advanced, but you've prepared your body a little bit more to do some more deepening, whether it's deepening with your meditation practice, deepening with more varied types of breath work, or deeper stretches and mobility exercises, or learning how to incorporate the somatic technique into other modalities or exercises. Maybe you do like to lift weights, learning to do it in more slow, controlled breath to movement motions versus just hammering out those reps. Right?
Mhm.
So,
One of the things that you have touched on is this word awareness of our bodies. You just were just obviously mentioning it there, kind of like banging out the reps versus a slow. What is what is the value of cultivating awareness of being in our bodies or having a body versus just
yes.
making the movement, right? To activate the muscle.
Right. One I would say is it helps with injury prevention. Um, I have a client that I worked with recently, and before she started working with me, she joined a gym, um, and she wanted to challenge herself and, and do a cartwheel. And she did, but I think she tried to do a few more and ended up injuring her body. Um, but if she had that sensing, I think she had already did like a full intense workout prior
Mhm.
to doing the cartwheels as well. Um, which I mean, I commend her for like when I say like, him, is my body still capable of doing this? Right? Cartwheels are fun. But knowing like, okay, after the first or maybe the second, what were you at your limit, and being able to take that moment, especially after having done that workout, um, to make sure that you don't injure something. Knowing where your limits are.
Mhm.
That's one big thing. Um, and then that awareness helps with just emotional regulation. Being aware of how you're feeling. Sometimes, if you're carrying pain or tension or stress, knowing where that's coming from, why you're carrying it. You people, myself included, can tend to reflect that outwardly unintentionally,
Mhm.
right? You might be going through something or experiencing some pain that has nothing to do with anybody else, right?
Mhm.
But having some awareness of how you're feeling mentally, emotionally, physically can help redirect, allow you the opportunity to work on those areas so that you can feel good before you start interacting with others. You
Mhm.
know, a lot of us do online meetings, maybe taking a few moments knowing, okay, this is going to be a stressful meeting, or maybe I'm nervous about this, or whatever the case may be, starting to feel tension, calming yourself, calming your body, centering, focusing on where you're feeling that stress and anxiety, where you're carrying it, and allowing your body to release it before engaging with others.
Mhm. Talk to me about hypnotherapy. That is something that in the kind of spiritual world is commonplace or, widely accepted. And yet others think about the person on stage at the county fair. Uh,
Right.
how has hypnotherapy helped you, and how do you utilize it to help your clients?
Yes. This practice, um, it was something that I had been aware of, but more of like meditation visualization. I think those that practice it were still trying to, not only make it mainstream, but make the word hypnotherapy like not taboo for the reasons you just said. You tend to think of the stage performer. Like, the most common comment I get, are you going to make me cluck like a chicken? Like, do you want to? If that's what you want, we can work on that, but that's not what I'm trying to, right? And so I was going through a business coaching program for my travel agency business. And the coach had made a comment, you know, the money will come. If you're doing the work, you're putting in the effort, you're progressing, you're making sure you're doing all the things to make your goals happen, they're going to happen and the money will come. I was having doubts at that time about how to grow the business and making certain investments. And she's like, you're doing all the things, it's going to happen. And so I got off that call pondering about that concept. Like, that's a familiar concept. That's abundance. Let me go deeper into this. And when I started going down the rabbit hole of the spirituality and abundance, and that's where I learned about like hypnotherapy. Yeah, I already know about hypnosis, but the concept of abundance, manifestation, and how it tied in with hypnosis. And I start using the hypnosis nightly to reset my mind on how I think about the work I do, how I help others, overcoming my own personal limitations, knowing that exactly what she said, if I'm putting in the work, if I know that the path that I'm on is the right path, this is for me, I'm doing all the things, it's going to happen. The only thing that's going to get in my way is me. You know, it's my own self doubts that's going to stop it from happening. Um, and it was through that practice that helped me release those self doubts, helped me to achieve so many more things, whether it be in my yoga practice, or my business. And going through that, like I said, I was still grieving my dad. My mom was grieving as well. We were kind of had a tumultuous relationship at that time. I think because of the grief, just hadn't know how to deal with it. She wasn't necessarily open to receiving the same things that I was doing. So I, worked on myself, right? And through the work on myself, people started seeing my transformation. They knew something was different. My relationships were healing. I was able to communicate better, um, more effective at my job and the things that I do. And when I saw that transformation for myself, I realized I have to help other people. I know people who need this, and
Yeah,
I have
it's
to learn it
wonderful.
so I can help them too. And
When you talk about the clients that you coach, what are the types of people that you work with primarily, and what are the challenges that they're coming to you with?
um, a lot of people with, just, I hate to use this term, but, just kind of general pain, stress, anxiety. I have found in my work and a lot of research, everybody's story essentially is a COVID story. Like, we have all gone through this traumatic event. The whole world went through a traumatic event, right? But we all had to, get back to work probably sooner than we should have. We had to adapt to make life and work happen in these weird times, like virtual, hybrid. Um, we've created this new normal, and we had to do it in a very quick pace, right? And we were already on under stress, and just adding to that, adding to it. And there has been research that has shown that there's been a 25% increase in the US of stress anxiety disorders, and 4% globally. And then, as well as similar numbers in terms of chronic pain issues as well,
Mm.
globally. And so I've found that this is a needed, um, across the globe. Like, a lot of us are feeling this thing, right?
Mm.
And not really sure why. Can't necessarily identify why I'm just constantly in this rat race, or feeling discomfort, waking up daily, feeling these things, and it's probably similar things that I've went through. Um, but fortunately, I was blessed to have the opportunities to train and learn deeply, but now I'm ready to share that with others so they can start freeing themselves of the pain, giving them the techniques to do on their own at home. I don't want people to feel like they have to come to me for the rest of their lives for help. um, no, I want them to feel like they have a community, and that's what I'm building, a
Mhm.
community for people to talk to, have a resource, guide, you know, understanding what other people are experiencing and knowing that they're not alone in that.
Mhm. What does it look like when someone comes to you for coaching? Is it a certain number of sessions? How do you choose the different modalities that you utilize with them? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, one reason why I prefer the hypnotherapy, well, hypnosis and NLP, the training that I've gone to, they're kind of hand in hand. Um, but with the hypnosis, it expedites the healing process because of, some of the blocks that I talked about that we often have, like, oh, I'm not able to heal. I had this injury, or I have these constraints. I can't do it. I don't have time. We can work on those things. And so my discovery call gives me an opportunity to understand what some of the limitations my clients might have. And I usually recommend 2 to 3 sessions, like full hour and a half sessions, because we do the somatic exercise, gives them, like I said, the tools and techniques, learning the movements, working on specific areas of their body. I give them a detailed plan. Here are some exercises you can do on your own at home. Work on these for the next couple of weeks, the breath technique. So we go over all that in the first call and do a session of the hypnotherapy as well to help um, get to the subconscious, understand that they're capable of healing, knowing where it is that needs to be healed, and then giving them the opportunity to take away and do the work on their own, you know, and then coming back, seeing where they're at, going over some of the movements, seeing how they feel, and then doing another hypnotherapy session at that point to anchor some of the concepts that we've worked on to allow them to continue to prosper. So,
Mhm. And you do this primarily via Zoom, is this correct?
yes, people that are local, I'll do some things in person if they're preferring it,
Mhm.
but primarily in Zoom. Not everybody is local here in Houston, but then I also do workshops and group sessions as well.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier that you also own Good Life Travel by Danielle. It's a
Yes,
travel host agency dedicated to organizing group wellness retreats. So, how can you assist retreat leaders if they're looking for assist? I know that's one of the biggest challenges that Mandy and I have faced in hosting retreats is finding the location that's the perfect
yeah,
fit and the travel for everyone. Like, how do you help?
yeah. So I know as a business owner, we're already strapped with lots of things to do, and then adding organizing a retreat is, more work, right? And so my agency is a way for you to kind of hand off those laborious tasks, whether it's doing the extensive research or payment management, managing who all is coming, that's somebody that can handle it to free up your time, like booking travel, coordinating trips from start to finish, right, can be very time consuming. And so, my group of agents, we are knowledgeable on various destinations. We have extensive training with the resorts, whether we visit them or done online training, working closely with their business development managers to really understand the product. One thing I found with working with retreat organizers, social media is great and all, but oftentimes they say, "Oh, I saw this resort on Instagram or on TikTok and it looked beautiful. That's where I want my retreat." But it gives us the opportunity to really understand, well, what is the experience you're looking for? Who is your clientele? And does this option fit their budget and the experience you're looking for? Because that resort or location may not fully fit your needs or your client's needs, right? Making sure that when you book this resort, that you're actually able to sell it out and you're not. um, pricing out your primary clients. And so working with us really helps identify some value options, value added options, not necessarily cheap, right? Not travel isn't inexpensive, but what resorts, locations are going to give you and your clients the most value, providing um, some of them might already include a lot of activities. And so maybe you're filling in with your expertise with what might already be there. Are you bringing multiple people? Are you looking to make money off of this? Help us understand what your needs are so we can find the best options, price it accordingly for who you're trying to attract.
Awesome. Talk to me about where people can connect with you, websites, social media. What's the best place for them to reach out?
Yes. So my website is Dr. Danielle Griff. You can find more information about my resources, services around the somatic exercise and hypnotherapy coaching. In January, we're launching virtual group coaching as well. So if you want to have weekly sessions with me, you can submit questions online prior to the session, answer them, go over some of the exercises in a 1 hour virtual session. Also, I'm on Instagram, Dr. Danielle Griff. And pretty much all of the social media channels. So, and then my travel agency is daniellegltravel.com. That's Good Life Travel by Danielle.
Awesome. All right. We'll put all of those links, of course, in the show notes. If you're listening on your phone, you can swipe up and find those links. Danielle, one last question. If someone is kind of struggling right now in life, they're just feeling a little down, they're just maybe they've got an injury that they haven't been able to kind of fully recover from, they're maybe dealing with some grief, they're just struggling. What encouragement would you leave them with today?
I would say, they're not alone. Grief, stress, anxiety can feel isolating. A lot of times, it's hard to talk about what we're going through. We're afraid of judgment, um, but looking for those communities that are, our judgment-free zones. Um, and again, knowing that you're not alone and finding people to help you work through those concerns or grief. Grief is a process, and it takes time. Um,
Yeah, you're not alone. That is number one, definitely key to remember. And I love how you said you got to see you're not alone, but you also have to do a little effort. You have to set intention of like connecting with those communities that
right,
are out there. It's
right.
easy to isolate ourselves in the midst of whatever challenge that might be, but to reach out, go to that yoga studio, be the and
Right.
connect with a new community. Danielle, it's so great to be with you and hear your journey and just your desire to help people in all these different ways, and just appreciate how you're making a difference in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to share.